So the book of Acts gives us the model for reaching the ends of the earth. So I'm in Burma right now. The island of Bali is absolutely spectacular. We are in Cambodia here. This is a beautiful family that lives in a village that we've done distributions with. In the Great Commission, let's remember Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations. And for us at World Mission, it's really important that the Word of God be a part of that. I mean, how can you really become a disciple if you don't have access to the Word of God? We are in Kor, the middle of Rendili land, and all these brothers are Rendili pastors. So are you guys happy about these units?
Yes.
All right. Cambodia is an amazing country. It's surrounded by Laos, Vietnam, and Thailand, and the 16 million people that live here, they say about 85% are Buddhists, and many of them have never heard the gospel for the first time.
Hi there and welcome. This is the Great Commission Update. I'm Rusty Humphreys and he's Greg Kelly, the CEO of World Mission. And Greg, it's always a pleasure. Again, Great Commission Update. That's the name of the show. What is the Great Commission and what is it we're supposed to do?
Wow. Hey, great question, Rusty. Good to see you, my friend. The Great Commission. Wow. There's so many ways to answer that, but I think just getting right to the point, it's basically the last words that Jesus gave his disciples that apply for all of us today. You can find it specifically in scriptures in the end of the book of Matthew and then also in the end of Mark. And essentially, Rusty, what Jesus said, and again, his last words to his disciples, so, pretty important stuff. He tells them to go and make disciples of all nations. So basically, he's kind of empowering them and saying, hey, take the good news, the message that I've taught you of salvation, and tell everybody. And that applies to us today. And so at World Mission, that's really what our effort is. It's about taking the gospel, the good news to all these nations that are across the earth.
And so World Mission is an organization, a great organization. I've spent time there where you guys go around the world. You try to find people that have never heard the gospel and bring it to them. And one of the ways you do it is with this little recorder thing. You've got it right there. What's it called?
Well, this is called the Treasure, and it's a solar-powered audio device that we have. We put the Bible on, and the reason that we do that is because so many of these places, Rusty's, that haven't heard. And now imagine this. So what I'm going to tell you, you're probably not going to believe, but here we are in 2019, and you're thinking, and by the way, we are the first generation in history to be anywhere in the world within 24 hours. Because of transportation, because of travel.
That is amazing, isn't it? I mean, not only, travel, think of food. We eat every day like a king would have eaten 200 years ago, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's amazing where we're at.
And to think in 2019, here I just said the last words Jesus said, of course, over 2,000 years ago, and to think that about a third of the world's population are yet to hear for the first time. That's crazy. And for us, that's just not acceptable. You and I, Rusty, and anyone who's a follower of Jesus, we're stewards now of that message. Go and make disciples of all nations. So we really, as an organization, we try to be strategic and say, okay, where has the gospel already gone? Mm-hmm. Where are there already Christians? Okay, let's not go there and build upon someone else's work, but let's go to some of these other places that haven't heard. And, the reality is, buddy, they're harder places. They're places that might not even want you and I to come, not exactly friendly to us.
Right.
That doesn't take us off the hook or say, well, we can pass that. We have to go to these difficult places if we're going to finish the job that was given to us.
Okay, one of the other things I love about this show is that not only are we talking about the Great Commission, but you have contacts all over the world, and you're able to kind of give us updates on news in ways that the news is not reporting. There's one area where you're kind of concerned about right now, isn't there? Well, there's a lot of areas, but there's one that's got your attention today.
Yeah, I think we tend to be drawn to the places that are just the most messed up, I guess is the way to say it. The places where there's a lot of persecution, a lot of difficulty. A lot of the people that we work with, Rusty, are the national partners. So when you were talking about the Treasure, which is the solar-powered audio Bible, I'm not the one distributing it. I'd love to go to these places, but I don't speak the language. I don't look like them. I'm not going to blend in very well. But the people that distribute the treasure are from the country. They speak the language. They understand the culture. And this place that you are alluding to that really has gotten our attention recently because it's the greatest movement of refugees in the last really 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
They're moving. The people group is called the Rohingya, and they are primarily a Muslim people group. In fact, they're 100% Muslim statistically.
Okay.
And they were primarily in the country of Myanmar, which was formerly Burma, and now they're being pushed out in the most horrific way, primarily into the country of Bangladesh.
Okay, we're going to get to that in just a second because I'm pretty good with geography. Mm-hmm. I have no idea where you're talking about. I mean, I'm guessing it's not the southern tip of England.
Yeah.
Where are we talking? What area of the world is this? Is it Africa?
We're in the Eastern Hemisphere, and you keep going east from Africa into Southeast Asia. So basically, we're talking just south of China, in between kind of China to the north, and then India is just to the west of it. So it's that little pocket there where you have Myanmar, you have Burma, you have Thailand, Vietnam, all this, the countries of Southeast Asia. So it's right in that kind of peninsula area. And it's a massive concentration. I mean, Bangladesh is one of the most heavily concentrated populations of people because it's a fairly small country, but it's like 160 million people live there.
Wow.
So they're just packed in there. And so when you bring the Rohingyas, which, I mean, I'm not talking about some insignificant number. You're talking about almost 1 million people in the last 3 years that have come across the border. And there's just no place for them to go.
Well, so, why is it so bad there? What's going on? I mean, why do so many people want to leave?
Well, Myanmar is a primarily Buddhist country, and this dates back really like a lot of the conflicts. You know, we look at things today in 2019 and we go, okay, we try and, figure it out now. And the reality is that in most of these places where there's such conflict and it's people group tension, it's happened generations before is really the root of it. And this is no different than that. So that we're going back, it's even before, I'll just go back to World War II, where essentially the Burmese, a Buddhist nation, more aligned with Japan, and the Rohingya, more of a Muslim group, more identified with the English and, the allied countries. So that was really, as you can imagine, a massive beginning of the tension.
Sure.
But then it was really religious oriented, where the Burmese being Buddhist and the Rohingya, as I said, 100% Muslim. So that tension has just spilled over. And there's been times like in the 70s and then the 90s and then more recently in the last few years where maybe 10,000 or so kind of scooted across and became refugees. But what we're seeing right now, Rusty, this wave is unprecedented.
So is it all based in religion? Is it economic? Is it political? Is it what is it that's the tension here?
Yeah, exactly. I would say it's two of the three. I would say it's political and it's also religious. There's no doubt about it from the standpoint. So, but you've got the reason it's so significant, Rusty, is there's a town in Bangladesh that has become the largest refugee camp in the world. So, I mean, that's significant, right?
Wow.
I mean, you're talking about almost 1 million people living in this border area that's now filled with these, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees. And they have been, it's not just like, hey, let's just go over there. They have greener pastures, better farming land.
Right.
Some of our families there, let's go there. It's like the Burmese went into these areas and it's literal ethnic cleansing. They've gone in there and they've wiped out village after village. You can see satellite imagery of an area with beautiful, valleys and hills and just villages built in there. And then, several weeks later, just the entire thing torched. I mean, the entire thing, no home left. And so, you've got these horrific situations. And unfortunately, when those things happen, those who are affected the most are women and children. Half of the refugees are children. So this is a real catastrophic situation that we really need to have our eyes wide open on.
I mean, you would think that this would be, you're saying the biggest refugee crisis is it in the history of the world or just in the world right now? I mean,
No,
it's up there.
it's the largest single camp.
Okay.
It used to be probably for the last 30 years at a place called Kenya, filled with mainly Somalis, called Dadaab.
Okay.
That was, for the last 30 years, the largest single refugee camp. Now, in the matter of less than 3 years, it went from, let's say, under 100,000 to 1 million people in less than 3 years. So we're talking about this catastrophic movement of people. And keep in mind, when they're leaving everything behind. I mean, what wasn't burnt to the ground, right? I mean, so their homes, they lost everything, and they're just literally picking up their kids. And then, I mean, just the cruelty of it. There's landmines that the Burmese military was setting up. And then once they got into the country, they barricaded them because they don't want them back in. They're literally a stateless people. Burma doesn't want them back, or Myanmar, and Bangladesh doesn't want them. So they're in this really very undesirable areas. I mean, where it's not like flat terrain. It's like kind of hilly, and it's going into the monsoon season on top of that, Rusty. It's just one kind of bad thing after another is stacking up. And so you've got these million people packed into this area. Nobody wants them. They're 100% Muslim. But we see it as an opportunity, really, to really fulfill the Great Commission as it relates to that group.
You know, I just looked up online, U.S. cities with 1 million population. So let's see here, Dallas, San Diego. Okay, so San Diego is the 10th largest city in America. They have 1 million people.
Mm-hmm.
So the entire city of San Diego. Austin is the 11th largest city in America. They have less people than 1 million.
Yeah.
I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, that's a massive amount of people. And as I said, the issues with the monsoon coming, that might not, hey, what does that mean? I mean, we're talking about, rains that come in by the foot. I mean, when it comes in there, it just totally devastates areas. And right now, it starts in June. So it's going
and
down.
it like rains, that month for the entire year, right?
Exactly. They're trying to reinforce some of the hills because historically these hills, they know, I mean, they've been there for, centuries. And where these people are now going to live, they're having to sort of excavate them to make them safe because historically half of these hills just kind of collapse under the monsoon. That's where the people are living right now. So like I said, this is not like even the desirable area. So imagine you're in a tent on a hill that when it rains, the whole thing caves in. That's where 1 million people are living right now. You have about, from a sanitation standpoint, just talking about that, you can talk about food, clean water, sanitation. Obviously, I mean, you're not even thinking about educating your kids.
Right.
I mean, that's such a distant thought. You're just thinking survival. But just from a sanitation standpoint, you might have one latrine for every, 200 people, something like that. So I mean,
and when you're talking latrine, they wish it was a porta potty, right? I mean, I've been to Africa, I've been to Sudan. It's a hole with a tent, and everybody's using that hole every day. And all I remember was when I was there, I saw a snake in there, and I held it for 4 days after that. I didn't know I could do that, but man, and can you imagine that's your life?
Yeah, exactly. So, I think one of the things, Rusty, just to point out here, is that this is a humanitarian crisis. It's an opportunity, quite honestly, in this, in our lifetime, the refugee crisis on a global scale is the worst it's been in our lifetime, right? So there's opportunities everywhere. But the thing that I like pointing out to people as it relates to the Great Commission, the humanitarian crisis is horrible. The church really needs to respond. And quite honestly, we've been whiffing. We just haven't responded well to these refugee crises because it's not clean. It's like, where are they at? Well, they're stateless people. They're all Muslim. How do we get in there? What's organized? And this is the reality.
And they don't want you either, right?
They don't want us there.
Right.
And the government, even I was just communicating with one of our partners on the ground. I just got an email from him today. And he said, Greg, we're going in there. We're trying to minister. But the government officials who are overseeing these camps, they won't let us in. So imagine this. You have truckloads of aid that you're trying to get in there. And the government is basically holding you back and saying, we don't want you to get in there.
And why they don't want the supplies? Is it just they don't want the message more than they want the supplies?
It's difficult, right? I mean, it's a complicated situation, but one of the answers to your question is that the government doesn't want the refugees to be encouraged or to get too comfortable, because the reality is that so much of Bangladesh, I mean, almost half of the population lives in utter impoverished circumstances, not even counting these refugees. And so the government doesn't want all this outside aid from NGOs or non-governmental organizations coming in there, and the refugees get too comfortable, and therefore they're never going to want to leave.
Right.
So you've got this vicious cycle of aid that's trying to come in and pour in from people. But the reality is that on a global scene, this is largely an unknown need, except for tight circles.
I mean, you'd think this would be top news every day. It's not. And it's good to have guys like you who are professionals, that you know people on the ground. I mean, a great example that all of us who were around in the 80s probably participated in, and that was We Are the World. Yeah. And we all gave money. We were, USA for Africa, and we were going to help, and Hands Across America, and all these things we were going to do. And they got the money, they got the food, they took it to Africa, and what happened? The government took all of it and gave it to their military.
Yeah, even a more modern example is Haiti, the earthquake in Haiti. They say that less than 10% of the funds that were donated actually got to the kind of the root issues of the cause, because of bureaucracy, because of corruption just in Haiti as a whole, just because of funds.
The Clintons. Sorry, what? I'm sorry, I didn't want to. Clintons.
So it's a problem. You're right.
Yeah, we're not going to get political at all, but we talked about we talked about this the other day, and it's true too. What we did wrong there was we kept bringing in all this free rice, and they didn't even eat a lot of rice. But then we got them hooked on rice, and then we put all the rice farmers out of business because it was free. Why would you buy rice from Haiti when you get it free from America?
Yeah, exactly.
And that happens all around the world. And so I'm guessing you guys study on how to make the greatest impact and at the same time the least impact. Is that fair to say?
Well, I mean, I think as a principle, you want to land on the side of teaching someone to fish versus giving them a fish. Now, there's times, Rusty, when it's just survival. And so there's been plenty of times, and one of the expressions that World Mission has as a Christian nonprofit organization is our disaster relief. And there's times when, I can think of some like typhoons that have gone through and wiped out islands in the Philippines. I mean, the Philippines, right? Of the 12 most disaster-prone cities in the world, 10 of them are in the Philippines.
Is that right?
So, I mean, these typhoons, it's not a matter of if, it just when, and they wipe, I mean, they're devastating, like Category 5 hurricanes, and they wipe out entire, areas of islands. And so when you're going in and responding to those kind of circumstances, and I would liken the refugee crisis among the Rohingya to that, you're just trying to buy people some time. Right. I mean, they are days away from eternity. And so you just come in, it's no time to, sort of jam Jesus down their throat, if you will, but just love them, encourage them, let them know that you care. And the reality is, Rusty, that when we do that, we find that heart that was hardened to us. Now, remember, the Rohingya, 100% Muslim. I mean, it doesn't even register the number of Christians there because they're all Muslim. They're not like lining up, hey, tell me about Jesus. I want to know about him. They're hostile towards it. But when they're in this condition, and this is what I mean by it being an opportunity for the church, if we could just position ourselves and go in there and love these people, just love them. They're a human being. And every human being is built with this idea that, wow, when someone's caring for me, and there's something that happens inside of me that says, what's your motivation?
Yeah.
Why are you doing that? And boom, now the opportunity to distribute the treasure, to tell them about, the reason why. And that's what we're doing. And we're seeing Rohingya come to know Jesus. We saw about 3 months ago, I heard the first Rohingya church plant happening right in the midst of this devastation right now.
Wow.
From our on the ground, distributing aid, loving them. distributing treasures. And when they hear about the love of Jesus, it's just amazing what God can do.
And so the consequences have been lessened, or people aren't caring. They're just opening their hearts.
I think that's exactly what happens. There's just an appreciation. I mean, even the most staunch militant Muslim, if your kids are dying of starvation, or your family's getting sick because you don't have access to clean water, and someone comes alongside, you're not going to be debating them on the merits of Islam versus Christianity in that moment. You're going to look at them and you're going to go, thank you. I appreciate you doing that. And when the person who's administering the love in the form of aid has a humble heart and just allows God to use them, that hardened heart will just change. And now all of a sudden, we can share the good news with them, and what God does through that is a beautiful thing. So the church really needs to be responding, Rusty, right now to these million refugees that are in Bangladesh called the Rohingya. We just have to step up to the plate right now.
Are you hearing from other organizations that are stepping up to the plate, or that's part of what this show is about? It's trying to get those messages out there.
I wish I could say that there were more who were doing that, but unfortunately, the I don't want to say the sole response, but I'll say, 95% of the response has been through secular entities. So you have USAID and UN type organizations coming in and just purely giving aid. Now, what happens with that is that gets administered by the local jurisdiction. And if it's a 100% Muslim area, I mean, if you happen to be a Christian, you're going to be, sort of persecuted against, you're going to get leftovers. And it's not going to be, you're not going to be cared for. So the church really needs to step into this situation. And yeah, I get it. It's difficult. Like I said, our guys have been turned back, but that doesn't mean, that it's not worth it. We have to be resilient. We have to be determined to go into places like this, because the Rohingya, and it's a crazy situation, and it's no doubt unique in the world today. But I could take you to hundreds and hundreds of places that have similar barriers, maybe not to the extreme of 1 million people, but the Rohingya are representative of hundreds of places around the world that are difficult, complicated, and we have to engage and mobilize in those places. That's what we're doing as an organization.
Obviously, that's the worst of what's going on right now, and that's a heck of an update. Yeah. Are there other places right now that you've got your eye that you're looking at that keeping an eye on?
Yeah, no doubt about it. That back to the Great Commission, Rusty, and Jesus said, go make disciples. So we tell people all the time that converts won't survive, especially in these places like the Rohingya and what we call the 1040 window, which is that Eastern Hemisphere block where the fewest Christians in the world live. It's this.
Can you show? You've got the globe there. Can you show us on the globe what you're talking about? Because that's a pretty important thing.
This guy right here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So we're talking about this area right here. This swath of land right there is what's called the 1040 window. It basically starts in West Africa here, and then it comes all the way across, picks up North Africa, the Middle East, and then all of Southeast Asia. This is where the Rohingyas are at, right in this area right here. So
seems like that's mostly Muslim. It's territory. Is that correct?
So when you start in the West Africa and go across North Africa and the Middle East, it's all Muslim area, almost exclusively. And then as you start coming down into India, of course, that's the largest Hindu country in the world. In Nepal, Hindu. And then as you keep going to the east, you start getting into these areas of Buddhism, where you have countries like Myanmar and Thailand and Vietnam, all primarily Buddhist areas. And then you have Islam mixed in there as well. So it's kind of it's a mixture of those three primary religions, but that's where we work. Yeah, that's where we go, and those are the places that the church really has to engage. That's where, Rusty, that's where the worst of the worst of the worst things in the world are happening. That's primarily where a lot of the refugee issues are happening right now. Those are places where the highest levels of persecution are happening right now. They're not easy places to get to, but we have to, as the body of Christ, if we're going to take Jesus' message seriously. I mean, he didn't say, hey, go make disciples of all nations in only the places that are really easy that will smile when they hear my name.
Now, wouldn't that have been a lot easier?
Man,
come on. That would have been awesome.
I know. But you had asked about, some other places. And when we tell people the Great Commission, we remind them, he told us to make disciples, which involves training. And so we have two big trainings that are going on right now. One in the Horn of Africa, targeting mainly the Somalis. We have 70 leaders this week that are gathering, that are being trained in, how to engage radical Muslims and how to make disciples in that very complicated environment of the Horn of Africa.
Okay, very quickly, we're almost out of time, but how do you engage with radical Muslims? I've met them. They put guns in my back and threaten to cut off my head. I mean, it's scary for those guys that are really into it.
Yeah, that's for sure. And there's a couple things to that. One is the national emphasis, where there's people who speak their language, who look like them. It's a lot of friendship evangelism, we call it, a lot of one-on-one ministry where you're just engaging with someone at a human level. And God can sort of break down the barriers. But from a practical standpoint, on a spiritual level, the guys that and young ladies that we work with that are trained, they use the Old Testament primarily, versus starting in the New Testament. Because in the Old Testament, even the Quran has figures like Joshua and Moses, Abraham, that
Sure.
they acknowledge as great prophets. And of course, our Old Testament does as well. So starting there, building bridges.
Right. It's a lot of the same people, similar stories.
Exactly.
Abraham was supposed to sacrifice not Isaac, but Ishmael. I mean, those are the kind of things where it gets a little bit off. But you can at least talk about that, and you could even, oh, come on, it was Ishmael. And you could almost joke about it a little bit at first. I'm guessing that's how they do that.
Yeah. It's about just getting into their world and getting them nodding their head like this. Because when you start in the New Testament and say, Jesus, Son of God, you get this.
Right.
That's where the train comes off the tracks when you're talking to a Muslim. They believe in Jesus. They believe that he's a great prophet, teacher, even that he did miracles. But Jesus, the Son of God, you don't want to start your conversation there, because that's a deal breaker.
Yeah. Okay. We're about out of time here, Greg. People can go to the website worldmission.cc, and that's where they can get all the information about World Mission. Also, I know that there are different areas that you're looking for donations. People can specify. Where would you like them to specify money this time?
Boy, if we could get some help with the Rohingya refugees, Rusty, and just our humanitarian outreaches, that would be phenomenal. And then, of course, we're sending a lot of the treasures, not only in the Burmese language, in the Bengali language, but in their Rohingya language, which is really what they're asking for right now. So both the humanitarian and sending treasures, that would be amazing.
Man, I would think you have a treasure in Rohingya. Yeah. I mean, how crazy is that? That's amazing. And how many languages? You got like 15, 20 languages, right?
Yeah, plus a few thousand. We've got 5,000 languages that we can load onto the treasure.
That is unbelievable. Greg Kelly, that's his name. He's the CEO of World Mission. Greg, thank you so much. Looking forward to talking to you next time.
Thanks,
you can always find out more about World Mission. Go to worldmission.cc. Also, do us a favor. Would you go to iTunes and subscribe to the Great Commission Update and leave a comment? It's the way that you can help spread the word about the show. It's so very, very important. We'll see you next time. May God bless you, and thank you for being a part of the Great Commission Update.